We're back in the Limitless Leadership Lounge for another week of a tri-generational conversation for you, the emerging leader. I'm John Gehring. Great to have you along. Be sure if you're listening for the first time that you just sit back, relax, and enjoy and take in some leadership insights from our guest today. If you've been listening for a while, though, and you haven't shared any of our episodes or left us a review up on our podcast platforms, we'd be grateful if you would do that as well, especially if you're getting value from the conversations we have. I'm John Gehring, joined by Coach Jim Johnson. And Coach, you brought along a guest as well, so why don't we dive right in?
I'm looking forward to it. I've started to build a nice relationship with Jeff Springer. So let me read his bio and then we'll welcome to the show. So Dr. Jeff Springer has been an educator for 34 years and the founder of The Goal, getting others to achieve higher levels. The Goal team was created for helping high school students and young adults to maximize their personal leadership potential. Jeff recently released a book called Dad Prep, which we're going to get into a little bit, and I had the pleasure to read it. It was a wonderful read. Jeff is a former Texas high school football coach, an 11-year veteran of the classroom. He's also formerly the principal of Magnolia High School from 2002 to 2016. In 2013, Jeff was selected as the State of Texas TASSP State Principal of the Year. Besides founding Spring Strategies, Jeff also served part-time as the Minister of Men at Wildwood UMC and is currently a university student teacher supervisor at Sam Houston State and is the founder of Suit Up Ministries. Jeff attended Abilene Christian University, where he played on the 1977 National Championship football team, received his Bachelor of Arts in Teaching from Sam Houston State, and obtained his Master's of Sports Administration from the United States Sport Academy. In the spring of 2020, Jeff completed his doctorate in education with the emphasis in transformational leadership from Concordia University. Jeff is passionate about people and play. Developing others and helping them see their value and completeness is what drives Jeff in all relationships. Jeff loves being a husband, dad, and grandfather. He is also always seeking for ways to acknowledge men that strive to be daily devoted dads they are called to be, which is Dad University, which we're going to get into a moment. Jeff, who resides in Montgomery, Texas, has been married for 43 years and has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Jeff, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Well, Coach, thank you. It's my honor. I feel like I say this a lot when I love with great anticipation coming on to your show. I felt like I was in the locker room, and now I'm ready to get on the court. I was not a basketball player or something, but I'm going to use your field, versus the football field. But I'm ready to play, Coach. Put me in.
All right. Well, we're ready to put you in uniform and get you out, whether it's the field or the court. We're looking forward to it. So Jeff, we're going to delve in. We are going to delve into all your leadership, but right now you've been highly involved with, well, it was Suit Up Ministries. I know now you've been doing a lot of work. You call it Dad University. Can you share this story and what you're doing? Because for me, being a high school coach for over 3 decades, I just found that dads are so important. And when they're not in the home, it's a really difficult thing. And I admire what you're doing. So can you share the story and tell us what you're doing with that?
Yeah, I am passionate about what we're talking about today. It's so easy to talk about the things that you love, isn't it, Coach? And this is definitely something that it's near and dear to me. In 2008, we began for whatever reason God laid on my heart. I think it was because as a teacher, a coach, a former principal, I saw students walking into my building every day and a lot of times, aimless. And when you would have conversations with them, and remove the layers of their, conversation, you would find out often that there was no real positive male role model in their life. And really, and essentially, in most cases, no present father. Or if the father was there, he was not active. And so this leads to, as you know, a lot of disciplinary problems, absenteeism. There once was a book, well, there is a book out there written by an author, Bill Blankenhorn, who is a sociologist. It was written around 2000, 2001. And it's called Fatherless America. And he draws almost every single social ill in America today, and for the world for that matter, to the absence of a father. And so all of that combination really, the fact that I had an amazing dad, my parents were divorced. So, which I think gave me a little bit of an insight of what it's like to not have a dad under the same roof, because I only saw my dad every other week. And even though my dad was divorced, he was still devoted as a dad. But many men that get divorced, typically they not only divorce their spouse, they sometimes divorce unfortunately, their family and their children. And so we got to do something. And so in this day and age, our families are sometimes in a crisis, and I just feel like if we don't raise the next generation of men that are fathers to be the dad, we're going to lose our families, we're going to lose our nation. And so it's a wake up call to step up to the plate, to step in the gap. Thank you for mothers and aunties and grandmas and all those women that have continued to do their part. But the question that I was asking was, where are all the dads? And so that really is what drove me to what we have now. Suit Up Ministries is, my background for coaching and then also ministry is based on scripture, Romans 13:12. The night is nearly gone. The day is almost here. So put away the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. So that's where we get to suit up, to suit up, to be the dad that God has called you to be. To accept your responsibility as a role, these precious gifts that God has given us as a man, as a father, and to make the intentional decision to be the daily, active, devoted dad.
So
Excellent.
we talk about father figures, and I think this is important to make this distinction right off the bat, because you mentioned all the strong women that are in the lives of children, maybe without fathers, even other strong role models. But why is that father figure just so unique and so important, really irreplaceable?
There are certain things that a mother can bestow on their children, and there are certain things that a father can only bestow. And if we're, it really does take, they say it takes a village, but it really takes, it helps of that village as a mother and a father, even if they're not together. One of the first things, John, we tell our men is the greatest gift you can give your children is to love their mother. But sometimes as we know, things happen in relationships. So you may not always be the husband, but you will always be the father. And now the choice is, are you going to be the dad? And I say unfortunately because the divorce rate is so high, but when we would do Dad University Men conferences, we would have breakout sessions for divorced dads. And unfortunately, it was probably one of our most popular sessions, but we titled it Divorced but Devoted. Again, sometimes we can't control what happens between our partner, but we can control what we do with our children.
Yeah.
Good point. So let's delve just a little bit deeper, because I know you do work in the U.S. and outside. I believe you've done a lot of work in Africa. Tell us a little bit about, your program. What do you do to help these dads?
Yeah, we're so blessed, Coach, that we are in Uganda and we're in Kenya. We have been in Rwanda. We have been in Tanzania. We've been in Nigeria, but primarily we have two national directors and teams in those two, Uganda and Kenya. It was amazing how things get started. I never had, really honestly, Africa was never on our radar. But I had a gentleman that I met that came over here from Uganda, befriended him. He had an orphanage in Uganda. We hosted him at our church for several months. Then he went back to Uganda, and then he saw what we were doing pre-COVID in-person dad universities. And he messaged me one day on Facebook. He saw my posts on social media. And he said, he goes, Jeff, I want Dad University here. So at 4 a.m. in the morning on Saturdays, because it's 8-hour difference, we started with 7 men in his living room.
Wow.
And a month later, there was 25. A month later, there was 75. And there was 125. And 2 years later, we were Zooming with 1,500 men in 2 different locations. Now, in Africa, you can't just open your laptop like we're doing. Or run down your local Starbucks or whatever. So they have to gather in one location, and we project on a screen. And so you might have 5 or 6 or 7, 800 men in one location that I'm zooming to. But your question about what do we do with them? Well, first of all, we remind them, we talk about what does it look like to be daily? What does it look like to be active? What we break each one of those down. What's it mean to be devoted? And some of these things that we know as men here, even though we don't always do that, was not even, it was like an epiphany for some of them in Africa. It was like, we talk to our kids? Really, we play with our kids? So it was simple. We tell our wife where we're going when we leave the house. Just the things that we know we're supposed to do. I'm not saying we always do them, but we know they're wrong if we don't. They didn't even know that was a thing. So that was my epiphany, my eye opener, that what the things that we tell them, we have to, are very, the literal things, that we take for granted, is a lot of times the idea of even being a dad is a new concept and not just the biological donor.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about the importance, of their role with their wife and their children, and as a leader, and we talk about, and then we encourage men to be what we call champions, and champions become leaders of their own huddle. So the hope is that we have 500 men, that they're going back to their villages and communities, and they're going to spread the word. And they're going to gather another group of 5 or 6 men, and they're going to take what we teach them. So we're kind of like trainers of trainers, and the idea, the Great Commission, men need to, who talks, we talk a lot about sports, we talk a lot about the weather, we talk about but to get beyond that, beyond the water cooler conversation, how do we get around the table to talk about how difficult it is to be a dad? And and the fact that I want to be a better dad. And and maybe your story, Coach, will help me be a better dad, and vice versa. And and a young dad, a future dad, like in the next generation, raising the next. So we say in Africa, one man, one change, one generation. So we hope that if we have 100 men, we know that God's going to influence more than one, but we're looking for that one man that leaves here today that decides to make one change. We're not talking about like turning over the whole, because, one thing that would affect the next generation. So, and then we let God do the rest of the work.
So leadership, the concept of leadership is often taught on a macro level. Leadership coaches and consultants are often focused on leaders of large companies. What you're doing here is so unique, Dr. Springer, because now you're bringing leadership to a micro level, and within the family, that's an area of leadership where we're so suffering as a culture. What is needed in our world for a mindset shift of what leadership is, from this concept of you're only a leader if you have a team of 20 working underneath you, versus you're a leader even if you are simply a father of one child?
Yeah, John, I love that question. I absolutely love that question, because let me tell you why. Because now here's kind of maybe this might be our transition to the education part, but because when I'm talking to teachers, and Friday I'm talking to like 350 students, one of the things I'm telling them, John, is that they are overcomers and they are leaders. We all want to point to the principal, or at church, we want to point to the pastor or, teachers don't like that. They want to be teachers, but they are teacher leaders. I tell them, if you influence one person, and I know you do because you have 120 kids on your roll, you are influencing, good, bad, or indifferent. You're influencing. So you're just the only decision is, student, are you going to be a good leader or a bad leader? What kind of leader are you going to be? Because you are a leader. You're a student leader. You're a teacher leader. No matter what level you're at, we all lead. So now you bring that down to the dads. What I tell the dads, isn't it interesting? And we have a chapter in my book, because there's 3 chapters about vision, mission, and goals. Yeah, and one of my points in there is if we sit around the table at the corporate world and set vision, mission. Every church has a mission, vision, goals. But so as you said, John, why don't we sit around our own tables, not just the boardrooms, and talk about the goals of our family members? I will tell you this, I'm not making this up. I'm not telling you this because that I have it all together. And that's one of the first things I tell my African friends is, we don't have it all together here in America. This is not the American coming over here to tell you that we've got it all together. We're partly there because you are hungry and you've asked us to come. In America, quite frankly, we can't get a man to walk across the street for a cup of coffee. But yet you will drive 6 hours one way for a 2-hour Zoom meeting. So there's the difference. But I used to, when my kids were in elementary and junior high, every Sunday night, Coach, we would sit around the table and we would do goals. And I had a form, and they would set 3 goals. And 1 would be academic, school related, and 2 would be personal. And I would do this. We did the same thing at Goal Team. You read the very first thing you read, getting others to achieve higher levels. That was peer coaching. We would take our top kids that already innately know how to set goals, and maybe not necessarily innately, maybe they had parents that show them already. But there are a lot of students, the majority of our students, and don't know what goal setting is. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't set goals. Number one, sometimes they don't think they're worthy. First of all, they don't know how. Second of all, they don't think they're worthy of goal setting, or they want to compare their goals with someone else, and then they just don't do it. It becomes a dream. So we would teach these kids that already had the tools to a goal setting, to peer goal set with some of their fellow students that teachers would recommend. So if I was teacher and I had Johnny in my class and I felt like he would benefit from a goal setting session with one of my goal team members, students, then we would hook them up, and it would be peer to peer. And but goal setting is so important. I took Zig Ziglar's goal setting, put them in 7 steps. Identify the goal, first of all. Know who your opponent is. What is your plan of actions? What are the obstacles? What's a timeline, and those kind of things. All those, write them down, set a goal. And then with my kids, we would review those on Sunday night and say, okay, how did you do this week? Well, if they didn't do it, then we would keep them on, and we look at the plan of action and say, okay, which one of those steps did you miss? Which would be an indicator of why you didn't accomplish it. And then we would add other goals at once, and those goals became kind of a standard, once you achieved them. Many of those goals became just who we are, and they don't just go away, and those kind of things. But yeah, John, that question, can you tell I'm a little excited about that, that question? But yeah, that's great insight from you.
Thank you. That's accountability. What you just mentioned there. It's all accountability.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hey, Jeff, I want to share just a quick thing, because as you well know, my dad passed not too long ago, and so it was with a heavy heart, and that's why what you're doing makes such a big impact. And something I just want to share with our audiences, how much when you have a great leader like my father was, it impacted his family and so many people, because he was an educator for over 3 decades. But then the carry-on effect, the fact that I became an educator and hopefully impacted my family and many young people over my over 3 decades in it. So it's just a really powerful thing what you're doing and the impact. As we always used to tell our players, you are always on stage. And boy, as the father, we forget that, or as a leader, we really forget that. So you delved into goals, which is something, it's really powerful. We spent a lot of time with our teams on goals, but I'm going to ask you, because I know you were a head football coach for quite a
Mhm.
while. Tell what you do, because I think this is a challenge in building teams, is because we all have individual goals, whether we write them down or not. And as a leader, we taught them all the things, some of the things, principles you were just talking about. But how did you work with your team with their individual goals with a team sport like I did basketball, you did football, that is so essential that you're trying to strive for your team goals, right?
Right.
But each individual has their own individual goals. How did you mess those two? What was the formula for you?
Yeah. Well, I think you just can't. I think that's a great point. I think you can have goals for the sake of goals, but how meaningful are those goals? I think one of the questions that I've learned about goal setting is, and one of the things Zig Ziglar would say is, um, create a dream sheet. And so one column, you just continue, you just write as many goals as you can possibly think of. One word, two words, whatever, and then set it aside and then come back to it 24 hours, 48 hours later, and then go down each one of them on the other column and write down why. What's the why?
Mm.
And a lot of times I think another reason why people don't set goals is they don't know where to start. And so if I list 50 and I can eliminate half of them after I've kind of cogitated on them a little bit, and then I let it percolate, and then I come back, and then if you cannot explain or express why, then it's not a goal. So take it off. And so let's get down to the most important things. What are the most important things? And, Stephen Covey always said, never let what matters least, sacrifice what matters most, So sometimes the problem is not setting goals, it's having too many, so we need to laser focus. And then, so as the coach, it's our job to kind of direct, channel, and that's why I had my kids do three, one academic and two personal, because there's carryover. So you could have one team goal and two personal. And then how are those goals related because there are no bad goals unless they are to hurt someone else or hurt you,
Right.
so Jim, tell me about your team goal. Okay, tell me, so what are your personal goals? Now, are those two goals, do they feed into the team goals? Will they help undergird the team goals? Team, me, and so I think those are the conversations we all try to, and I think two things that are most important about goal setting: write them down, write it down, make it visible. You got to put it in your locker. It has to be on your forehead. On the mirror in your bathroom, wherever. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've written it down and I've flipped through a book and there it was in the middle of a book, years later. And now sometimes I would have accomplished that goal, and others, and honestly, if you don't put it front and center, that's not really something that you are going to achieve. I mean, why do we have them all over? Why do we as coaches are so great at branding and promoting, that we have our our battle cry in the locker room or above the door, play like a champion, or whatever it is, believe, whatever those are, we make them front and center. But anyway, I don't know, Jim, if that answers your question per se, but
Yeah, we
uh,
did something similar. I think is pretty powerful because, like, we always brought, I lived right behind the school. So, everybody knew where I lived, which could be good news and sometimes not so good news. But I would always invite my team over and we would have a team goals meeting and we would talk about our mission and a few other things. But after that, one of the things I did is we had an individual goal where I met with every player individually. We would talk about their individual goals, but then how do they sync with the team goals?
Right.
Right. And if they're not syncing, then, that's something we got to work out. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Dr. Springer, I know you've had a lot of experience in leadership in education. How does it compare as far as going from a coach and principal, where you're leading a smaller team versus you're leading an entire school? What is that comparison like? And was there an adjustment when you take on a new leadership role when there's more leaders underneath your leadership?
Yeah. My path was teacher coach, then assistant principal, then what they call at big schools here in Texas, associate principal. So
Mm.
you would have multiple assistant principals and then one associate principal, which is like the number two guy, and then the principal. So I served in each one of those capacities, surrounded by them in a district big enough that was people rich. But before I became a principal myself, I had been mentored by 5 or 6 other principals and took the best, from each one of those. And so I had great mentoring, great coaching. Um, so, but yes, first of all, to go from the classroom to an assistant principal was a change because your sphere of influence immediately, it's not as deep, but it's wide. But the way I think it was deep for me because I did it differently. I believe I always wanted to do, I was always, no matter what job I had, I was going to change the job description. Now that, in other words, as the assistant principal, I was still a sponsor of several things. So like the goal team, so it may be, that was not on my non-negotiable job description, but it was an add-on. And when I became a principal, I would challenge all of my assistant principals, administrators to what is their passion and what do they want to add to their job description that gets them out of bed in the morning. So many times, we get locked into these roles especially as assistant principal, the stereotypical assistant principal is the disciplinarian. Well, I don't, yeah, but I don't want to just be the disciplinarian. What else can I add to this? So, but I remember when I became the associate principal, not so much as the assistant, but when I became the associate, where there was only one, we had 3,200 students and about 250 teachers. Before then, I was never asked so often my opinion about something.
Wow.
All of a sudden, people wanted to know what I thought, and I go, I wasn't used to that. And then as a principal, everybody thinks you're supposed to have the answer, but, and so you have to learn that in the room, you're not always the smartest one in the room just because you're the principal. And so if you are smart, you'll take advantage, you'll use your team, you'll surround yourself with, I used to call my team the S team, not for Springer, but for synergy, the synergy team. So we would synergize each other, and so I believe in over communication. And I think I over communicate by necessity because I like to share not the burden, the opportunities. And because again, all of us are smarter than any one of us.
That's a great point. Hey, Jeff, you mentioned mentors. And as a young and emerging leader, this is something that I think people neglect is they don't use mentors or get mentors. But my curiosity for you is what advice would you give a young leader in getting the right mentor for them? And then maybe some of the suggestions about some questions you would ask a mentor. So it's a twofold in that, what advice would you have on trying to get the right mentor for you? And then secondly, what are some of the things you should be asking a mentor to help you become a better leader?
Yeah, I think that first of all, you've got to get to the point in whatever stage you're in, life stage or career stage, you have to acknowledge that you need others in your life. Um, that you're not an island, that no one creates, achieves greatness by themselves. You know, a lot of times one person gets the recognition, but they didn't get there by themselves. I'm a big play guy, activist, and it's an acronym. Now I did my dissertation on play at the secondary level, but play as in collaboration, discovery, empowerment, those kind of things, creativity. Play is an acronym that I use in my coaching. Who are your people? How do you love them? What do you need to acknowledge? And what do you yearn for? And if you do those four things, and there's we break each one of those down. Who are your people is really what you're talking about. We have to get to the point we go, well, who are our people? Sometimes that's a question that even the coach needs to ask. Go, who coaches the coach? Who mentors the mentor? We all need a sage. We all need someone. And honestly, John, you could be my mentor. It's not an age thing. It's the first half, second half of life thing. I may be 65 in my second half, and you may be your age in your first half. I mean, or I may be still stuck in my first half of life. It's not chronological. You're in second half, and there's things I can learn from you. Again, maybe there's a premise that I've been carrying all my life, and all of a sudden I run into you and you say something, I go, oh my gosh, there's another way to think about this. So sometimes it has nothing to do with, age. It has a lot to do with experience, so I go back to that first thing. And so that you have to acknowledge the need for others, and who do you want to model after? I think having some idea, a template of your own belief system, your philosophies, and then you don't look for a mentor so they can just cookie cut and stamp you, but you want somebody that you have some underlying principles in common with, and that they're gonna and they've been successful they've gone before you, um, and so um, and so a question, sometimes we have to seek those mentors ourselves and say, Jim, you know, would you be willing to coach me, mentor me, in, this coming year? And this coming year, I'm mentoring 8 assistant principals at all different, some of them are brand new to the district, some are brand new to the position. They all have different experiences. So I'm going to have to coach and mentor each one of those differently based on what their needs are, but and meet them where they're at as the coach. But as a coachee, I think we have to be willing and coachable, to to have our eyes open, and to be kind of a sponge, so to speak. But we want someone that's going to kind of talk us through some things, so we can find really our own answer in the mentoring.
Mm. And one area where mentorship is so important, obviously, is fatherhood too. And that's the other piece of this as well, is how do you know how to be a good father if you have no experience doing it? And
Yeah.
it's something that terrifies me as someone who's not a father yet. Is like, well, I could be the best leader of any kind. I could know all the leadership stuff in the world. But again, a lot of our leadership stuff that we hear and see around the world has nothing to do with fatherhood. It has to do with leading a big company of 100,000 people. So how much of that, the leadership advice and insight that we get and give, can be applied to something on a micro level like fatherhood?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all, again, it's the principles are all the same, but the specifics are what is different. Honesty, integrity, quality, all these universal principles that are time tested. Um, those are all what would work when relationship in the office is going to work in the, obviously your relationships are different and but being present, you know, and I think fathers work on prophesizing, promoting our kids. You can do it. You have what it takes, son. Daughter. You're you are valuable. And so again, I just think that I think the key there is, you just really have to, break that down and be able to commit, sometimes just admit that there's no silver bullet on fatherhood. John, you could say, I'm going to have children when I'm so and so because then I'll be ready. Well, first of all, I got news for you. You're never ready. I will tell you this. I remember my daughter is 36 years old. I remember like it was yesterday when we brought her home for the first time. And I laid my head on the pillow for the first time after we brought her home from the hospital. And it was then and there that I realized that my daughter was not a puppy. This was going to be a lifetime commitment. And so you are never ready. Nothing prepares you for that. But what men need are, as iron sharpens iron, we need to, hold each other up, encourage each other, commiserate with each other. God, can you believe my son did this? Or can you believe my daughter said this last night to me? What do you do about what, how do this too shall pass. And one of the advice that I tell young fathers is that don't ever wish a season of their life away, because it's just a momentary, it's just a mist, even with, dirty clothes on the floor and bed unmade and laundry to do and all that kind of stuff. Don't ever wish all that, because one day it will be that one day. And then you're going to think, okay, wow. So all of that is so important as a father. That's part of being that, that daily active, devoted dad.
Yep.
Well said. Jeff, I'm going to go back. Something that I'm really curious because it's so fascinating is both a head football coach and also, a principal leader of a whole school. Can you tell us and maybe share a story about building culture? Whether it was your football team or your school culture. How did you do it? And maybe tell us a story, either a positive or one you had to overcome in building a culture you were looking for.
Yeah. Well, um, I, this, Coach, that, the relationships that you build with your players are a lifetime. I have 12 board members, and 8 of them are former students of mine.
Wow.
And on my nonprofit. And John, all of them are like 48, 49, 50, 51, 52 years old. Okay.
Wow.
So these are kids that I coached. And some of them I grew up with, honestly, literally grew up with. I was 21, 22 years old, started with them in 6th grade, moved up to the high school with them. Some of them I had 5, 6, and 7 years in a row, so it's something that doesn't happen more than one time in a career. And, unless you just recycle yourself each time, and that doesn't, and nobody wants to do that. Once I made it to the high school, that's where I was for 31 years. So 31 of my 34, but, you know, those coaching and principal relationships are just so, that's the intangible payoff. I mean, it's why we get to do. That's why we're so blessed, and that's why we are part of the greatest profession ever. Teaching, coaching, and being an educator. And I still get to do that today with my student teachers who are now older, but they're students, as they're preparing to be the next generation of game changers, life changers. And so Um, so all of that is, all of that is so valuable. And so, again, so blessed to be able to see the full gamut, of that. So again, this it's you can't even put a price tag on it. There's no it's priceless, the relationships. But building culture is not, you can't, nobody loves you because you just walk in the room.
Hmm.
And there's no substitute for time. No replacement for time. You have to put, just like we tell our players, you have to put the work in. And so I remember when I became a principal in 2002, my own building, which is like being the mayor of a city under one roof, especially at 2,800 students. You, my goal, one of my goals, the first 100 days was I wanted to be old fast. So what I did is I got myself in front of the big groups, the drill team, the band, the choir, the football team, parent organizations. I went to communities, and I would meet and greet and do those kind of things. And so the next, and so to create those experiences, so I became old fast. And of course, 14 years later, which is, I tell people, that's like a teenager. I mean, that's like 4 or 5 times longer than the tenure of a principal or a head coach. Typically, 3 to 5 years is you pretty well maxed yourself out. You're either moving into the central office or you're moving to another building or you're doing something different. And the lifespan of a principal, but 14 years in the same building. And and I loved and it took us about 8 years. I tell new principals, you don't want to hear this, or new assistant principals, it to move the barge. I mean, to do the work. And then we reap the benefits the last 6 years. And not that we were content or stagnant, but again, culture doesn't just happen, and it's not you can't get it by reading a book. You can get a lot of good ideas, but you still have to be you. The very first thing I did symbolically, the very first thing I did symbolically is those principles that I've been talking about, that Stephen Covey talks about, quality in, and all of the, human dignity and all those universal principles that regardless of what our backgrounds are, we would all agree that those are time tested, unwavering. We put those huge in the hallway. As soon as you walked in the front door, I mean, I'm talking about like 8 by 10,
Hmm.
all those eight, principles. And then up and down the hallway, we did the peripheral principles, qualities. So subliminally, we wanted everybody to walk in and feel like this was a different place, that there is something different about this place. And those are all amplified from what I did in the locker room, Jim. I took them. It just got the sphere of influence just went from a team to a larger sphere of influence. So the same principles work for, but again, you have to tweak them, and you have to be authentic. It has to be real, and for that to happen, you have to have consistency. It has to be every day. They have to, and you have to be passionate about it. I talk about persistent passion, and so sometimes you have to fake it till you feel it a little bit, but and sometimes you are leading not the most happy people, and so you have to acknowledge people's balance where they are at some point, so it doesn't become, your positivity sometimes doesn't overwhelm them and become toxic. So all of those things are, things that you have to acknowledge as leaders, whether you're the head coach or whether you're the principal.
And even if you're a dad, and I love what you have dad prep, this 52 week guide, and I think it's so powerful to have a lesson every single week that you could take with you. And then at the end of the year, what's the seventh habit of highly effective people, right? Is sharpen the saw, which means start all over again,
Yeah.
right? So this
Yeah.
could be a guide for multiple years because those lessons will never get old, never dry out, and they might mean something different depending on the season of life that you or your child is in. So talk a little bit about Dad Prep, where we can get that, and what that means to you and all of the readers.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, John. You have some great insight. I'm telling you, you're well on your way.
Thank
Uh,
you.
so I could learn a lot from you. The book is available on Amazon. It's both we have it now in Spanish and English. It came out in the Spanish version in May, and we feel like that's going to enlarge our audience. You can purchase it through the website by going to thedaduniversity.com or suitupministries.org. Either one's going to take you to the website. If you want to order, if there was a group out there that wanted to order mass, we don't do Amazon because you're going to have to pay a lot more. But you go through us, we'll get you a deal. We'll make it. The goal is to get it in your hands. And we would love every man in every church, every community center, to have this book in there. It's not like it's not the ultimate playbook, but it is a playbook, and John, you're right. What I tell people, because men, I'm a great book starter, but I'm not always a great book finisher. So I might have like 4 or 5 books going at the same time. And honestly, I walk a lot, so I listen to books on Audible. Unfortunately, we don't have this on Audible yet, but the chapters are so small. They're only 2 or 3 pages. And I love this. Almost every, of course I would love it. I wrote it. But every chapter has this huge pullout. So even if you're on the run and it's on your table and you just want to grab it, this was on week 28 on Grow as a dad. And it says your story of growth and your urgency to prepare for growth can inspire others by enlarging their territory and their influence. So, it's just a quick idea, a quick thought. And it's not a cover to cover book, John, really. You like somebody, I was on a podcast just yesterday and they thought, do you recommend me waiting till January? Well, that's a good idea, but I would say start today. And start wherever you want to start. Because if you go to the table of contents, other than the 3 chapters on mission, vision, and goals, they don't really build on each other. It's spontaneous. That God gave me these 52 plus. I just sat down one day and started writing randomly what I thought a dad needed to do to prepare to be a dad. Just one words. And I didn't even know how they were going. I didn't even know what I was going to write about. And it was like, John, I would go to week 2 and I go, okay, God, what am I going to write about today? Okay, today I'm writing about serve. Okay. So I would write, and it was a blog for 52 weeks. And then the blog in 2021 became the manuscript in 2022 that came out in 2023. So I didn't know I was writing a book, honestly. I was writing 52. God laid on my heart one word. During COVID in 2020, I was standing at one of my former students' funerals. So a combination of that, and in the midst of being in a global pandemic and questioning my own mortality, God said one word to me: prepare. Okay, so as a dad coach, I thought, okay, that must mean how do we prepare as the dad? So the questions are, if a dad didn't read anything, if he didn't read any part of this book except for pages 2 and 3, he asked the 3 questions that would keep even the best dad up at night, because they're questions we need to continue to ask ourselves. Like, when I leave this earth, have I done everything in my power to equip my children for when I'm gone? Have I set a spiritual example that's given my children a foundation needed to be strong enough to endure hardships, pain, disappointments, and loss? Because we know this life is not easy. And then, will their faith be sufficient because of my influence, my guidance, and my love? So bottom line, have I done everything I can do to help my children or the next generation be prepared? And so anyway, so you could just, maybe you open up and you go, okay, well, maybe I need to know something about goals today. So I'm going to read this, or go to the table of contents and say, this is an area that in my dad ability that could be sharpened this week. And and it was pretty random, pretty spontaneous. One of my fellow men's ministry guys read the book and he goes, Jeff, you write, Jim, you'll like this. You write like you're a coach. Like I can hear your coach voice in the book. And really he was being really nice. He was trying to tell me that it's very simple reading. And I am a simple man. And I write simply. So, and as coaches, isn't that what we want to do? We want to make the message, understandable, comprehensible. We may not be literary geniuses, but we know how to coach the point.
Yeah. So, well, Jeff, I have one last question, and I know John will close with maybe a question and also about your contact. But you talked about your book, and I read it; and it was really good. My question, although I got to divert just for a moment, because for our audio listeners, we'll eventually get this on YouTube. You have a shirt that says "Foreigner." Is that the rock group?
Yes, 1977.
77. Well, you may not know this, but actually the lead singer of Foreigner is from Rochester, Lou Graham. So I just had to bring that up because I wasn't sure if that was
Yeah,
the.
yeah. I just saw him here in Houston not too long ago.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Of course, 1977 is the year I graduated from high school. I saw
Right.
Warner when I was in high school,
Wow.
and so matter of fact, I think I still have the ticket stub.
Oh,
And
wow. That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so yeah, you just never know. So it's a fascinating thing. But you talked about books. Just my last question for you is uh, besides your book, which is great about dads and certainly leadership, but what one or two other books, because I know you're avid in between listening and reading of books, that we would recommend a young leader to definitely read?
I am rereading or re-listening to The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier.
Okay.
He talks about it. Honestly, I patterned my book look after his book. Very simple read. He talks about the 7 questions that every coach should what's on your mind today. I mean, they're so simple. And what else? And what is the real issue here for you or challenge for you? Those kind of questions as we're managers and leaders, but we talked about we're all leaders, but as we're growing our leadership and developing others, I'm constantly wanting to sharpen my saw, John. I'm becoming a better coach, in my coaching sessions in the development of others. So that's a good book. Falling Upward is by Richard Rohr is a good book. Malcolm Gladwell writes many books, but he's David and Goliath is the title of that book, and it talks about what I love. One of my favorite parts of that book is where he emphasizes the importance of seeing each other as legitimate, as regardless of our backgrounds, and that's one of the reasons why in today's world that we have a hard time coming across the aisle because we don't see each other as legitimate, and until we see each other as legitimate, then there's no conversation. Right. And so I thought that was huge, and but anyway, those are a couple that I really would recommend.
Thank you.
Richard Rohr talks about John, as I alluded to before, that first and second half of life. Some of it's not a chronological thing. It's where you are in your growth. We can also be in our second half, but exhibit some first half tendencies.
Right. Coach still does that by running around on the tennis court, like he's 21 and still in the first half, right?
Right.
Dr. Jeffrey Springer, we thank you for your time today. Dad Prep, Preparation for Legacy. It's available on Amazon, link down in the show notes, as well as you said to reach out to you individually if you'd like a copy for maybe a group of yours or a church group,
Yeah.
how would we do that? What would be the best way to get in touch with you?
You can go to dadprep.org. The book has its own standalone, or you can go to the website to the daduniversity.com, and there's a drop down there. If you just scroll down, you can click on it. You can get both of it will take you to the Amazon link, or if you want to order group, there'll be a place where you just email us, and then someone will contact you and work it, how many you want and so forth, and then order those books for you and have them shipped to you at a very low price.
Right.
Well, we learned a lot about not only leadership in education, but leadership as a father. Dr. Springer, thank you so much for your time and for everything that you're doing to help dads and young leaders.
Well, to God be the glory.
Amen.